Hey, thanks for having me, and we're excited to be sharing today kind of the journey of the DoD to move to Devsecops with Kubernetes and Istio. We'll share how we managed to put containers and Kubernetes on jets and different DoD systems across DoD, and hopefully you'll have a lot of questions, and we'll have 10 minutes to answer some of your questions after. First, everything we do is open source, so it's pretty exciting to see. We have all the documentation, the source code repo, everything public for the world to see. So go to that website, software.dev.mil. If you go under the section DSOP documents, you're going to find all the links, all the recordings, all the videos, everything that explains how we've done what we've done in a year, both on the culture side, the technology side, the training side. And so hopefully that can become a live resource for you. We continuously update all these documents. Of course, the source code repo is accessible to anybody, so that's also pretty exciting as well. So when I look at the different ideas behind the DoD Enterprise Devsecops initiative, there are a few key components that were empowering the DoD to move fast to Devsecops. One is we wanted to avoid getting locked into a single cloud provider or platform. So we use Kubernetes and CNCF compliance, Cloud Native Computing Foundation compliance, to ensure we're not getting locked into anybody. And then we use OCI compliant containers. That gives us the ability to centrally accredit containers DoD-wide across classification levels. And my team, Platform One, is responsible for managing the central repo called now Repo One, used to be called the DCAR repo, which has all the centrally accredited and approved containers. So check it out on the website. You're going to be able to find both the source code called Repo One and the Iron Bank. And the Iron Bank is the binary side of all these containers that we centrally accredit both commercial products and open source software. So we have teams that work with companies across industry to ingest these containers and make it easy for companies that have software capabilities to get accredited DoD-wide and provide access in real time to their software releases. If you release 20 times a day, one time a month, does not matter. We automate the process to ingesting containers. The foundation of that is obviously on Kubernetes, and we use the concept of baked-in zero trust security using a sidecar container concept to bring a behavior detection and zero trust completely baked it into the stack. We use a Service Mesh Istio to do some of that. We'll talk more about that. But really, the reason why we were able to move so fast is by creating two teams. One is Cloud One. That's the Cloud Office team accessing both Amazon GovCloud and Azure Government to have access to two cloud providers. And we also have access to the IC clouds, C2S, and Fences for SAP. So that gives us kind of that multi-cloud capability and ease of access to cloud resources. Then, of course, we had Platform One on top of that. And so Platform One is the DevSecOps team. Platform One is agnostic, can be on top of Platform One, but it can also be on top of a weapon system, a business system, cyber offense, defense system, classified environment, air-gapped. We are agnostic. And so that is really kind of the beauty of Platform One. They can instantiate using infrastructure as code and GitOps principles, a DevSecOps environment on any environment, any classification levels. And we support multiple Kubernetes distributions. We'll talk about that as well. We created the concept of a DoD-wide continuous authority to operate, which is really changing the mindset of accreditation teams. Instead of accrediting the software itself and fast track the ATO, we accredit the factory and the software pipeline, DevSecOps pipeline, CI/CD pipeline, and define the gates, both in change management, cyber, and testing, to really validate all the necessary ingredients so that software that comes out of the factory is already accredited. And then we authorize teams that will be using the factory so they get the proper training and onboarding to be using the factory. And that is game-changing. That enables us to release software multiple times a day as needed based on the mission needs. We have 100,000 people we have to train, so we're bringing a lot of self-learning capabilities. We also partner with the AU to create the DevSecOps Academy. But again, with 100,000 people, we want to bring self-learning capabilities with unbiased content. So we partner with the Linux Foundation, the CNCF, and O'Reilly, the books, to provide unlimited access to all that content on the cloud. So it's not in a vacuum, and teams can put it to good use. Very exciting to see kind of the adoption we're getting. We now have the largest DoD programs using Platform One and DevSecOps, with teams like F-35, GBSD, Aegis in the Navy, and teams like Jake, the Joint Air Center as well. So really tackling all of the key aspects of software across the DoD, across all the services. This is not an Air Force only capability. This is a DoD-wide capability. DoD CIO just signed a couple of weeks ago a memo making Platform One the first DoD-wide approved DevSecOps capability. So why did we pick containers and Kubernetes? Again, one is abstraction, avoiding vendor lock-in. The immutability of containers give us the ability to centrally accredit containers and update layers. And so we have an OS hardened STIG that can be then shared across commercial companies and different layers. So if we have to update the base OS, we can centrally push these updates across all classification levels, streamlining patching and updating of all these Lego blocks. And so really using the concept of layers is game-changing. When you think of resiliency and self-healing, thanks to Kubernetes, that obviously brings a ton of value, particularly for weapon systems. The baked-in sidecar container stack that we built using open source and commercial cyber tools brings us the continuous monitoring and behavior and zero trust detection we need. The Lego blocks give us the freedom to swap things and try things out and be more adaptable. And of course, GitOps and IAC and infrastructure as code give us automation, right? And push button deployment, so there's no drift between environments. Very important as well. Kubernetes brings also the benefit of auto scaling and abstraction, so we can run the same stack and the same application and the same platform stack on all environment, whether it's edge use case, classified cloud air gapped, a weapon like a jet, or a space satellite, all the way to a cloud on-premise environment as well. So when I think of a DevSecOps stack and you look at all these pieces, and that's just one example, we have 170 plus containers we're supporting. Obviously, you can imagine if you had to update all these tools one at a time with VMs, that is obviously not feasible. You're gonna have drift, you're gonna have issues with different images and different formats on different cloud providers and on-premise environments. By having the ability to have the central repo of containers and centrally partner with the companies or the open source communities to update these Lego blocks in real time with complete automation and continuously monitoring CVEs and behavior of these containers bring obviously a massive benefit to the DoD in ensuring we're getting access to the best and brightest tools and capabilities, but also don't get behind when it comes to adopting new options. So everything we do is containerized. We don't run virtual machines when it comes to any of these tools. And we use the concept of layers with Cloud One that can bring the cloud layer, but of course we can also run on classified clouds and on-premise embedded systems, edge use cases, whether it's Amazon Outpost or Snowball or Azure Stack or vSphere environment. Then you're going to put Kubernetes on top, and we support multiple Kubernetes distribution, whether it's OpenShift, whether it's VMware TKG, Day2IQ Convoy, Rancher, Oracle, AKS, EKS, you name it. But on top of that, we're going to bring the CI/CD pipeline, all the containers, and then the service mesh. And the service mesh is critical to the east and west traffic management. For people that don't know what a service mesh is, we have great training on the website to go understand how we use Istio to do zero trust enforcement across the stack. So container A to talk to has to be whitelisted to be able to do so. In effect, the application layer, what's left up there is only 10% left of NIST controls, and so inheriting 90% of the controls And thanks to the continuous monitoring stack we have on the left side here, you end up really having access to a turnkey cyber stack that's going to run in runtime, in build during your DevSecOps pipeline, all the way to your production environment. So the key is not to take just containers and run them on bare metal, is to run on the platform in production as well. So when you think of Platform One, one of the prime enabler and why Platform One became a DoD-wide service is we see software factories popping up left and right from different services, and they all pretty much have to build the same stack and same capabilities to start producing software. We don't want to be in the business of building factories. We want to be in the business of building mission software. And so Platform One is a capability that any development team or software factory team or PE or PMO can use and consume to instantiate a factory, so you don't have to build the factory itself, but can use a factory to build software. And that is critical. And we partner with dozens of federal agencies outside of DoD, dozens of teams within the defense industrial base are using Platform One and pushing capabilities. For startups, it's awesome to be able to get accredited DoD-wide in a couple of weeks if they can push the containers to the repo one repo. So brings a ton of value. We have all these different teams across DoD, of course, consuming Platform One. There are dozens of them with all pretty cool names. Both Air Force, Navy, and Army are consuming different services of Platform One. We see Platform One as a company providing services. It is not mandated to use any of these services, but at the same time, it's streamlining access to different things. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel when you don't want to, and you can use as much or as little as you want when it comes to the Platform One services. Repo One is a source code repo. We have all the ISC automation Terraform code, so we're not locked into a specific cloud provider or environment. It's accessible to the world. Iron Bank now has actually 140 containers. The slide is not updated. So we have 140 containers available today. We're going to have probably 220 by the end of the year. So we centrally accredit and sign containers and provide a full analysis of risk for consumers of the container as well. So that's the Iron Bank. And then, of course, we bring different options of Kubernetes. We partner directly with the companies, whether it's Amazon Azure, Red Hat, Day2IQ, VMware, Rancher, Oracle. We have hardened versions of their distribution, their Kubernetes distribution on the repo when they provided it to us. We also built a matrix. You're going to find that on the website. If you go on the DSUP document section and you look for matrix and you don't know what Kubernetes distribution to use for your mission and getting stuff done, you'll see we collected data from each product to see who can do what, right? So if you want to run on real-time OS on an embedded system to be able to put the containers and Kubernetes on the jet, very few Kubernetes distribution let you do that. So we track all these different capabilities and update this as a living document on the repo online. So again, no need to reinvent the wheel, hardening, staging, OpenShift or VMware or whatever, right? Rancher, Day2IQ Convoy or whatever. We have the code on the repo supported by the companies. The next piece is the two key services. We have the Polybus and the Big Bang. The Polybus is a multi-tenant environment. So teams that just want to get started in DevSecOps and they want to get access to existing environment at different classification levels. It's a pay-per-use model where we charge about $2,000 per developer per month to get access to the DevSecOps environment. It's both development, staging, and production environment with a full cyber stack. Ops includes the licenses, includes some of the cloud compute and storage baked in. And that is an easy way to get started and benefit from the continuous ATO to release software multiple times a day. And then the Big Bang is a more dedicated environment for bigger teams like F-35, GPSD, or JAIC. They would get a dedicated enclave where they get to pick the tools. That's a big difference. The Polybus, you just are a consumer of the tools we picked based on demand, versus the Big Bang, you get to pick the tools you want to have, and we have contract vehicle to get the tools and the licenses and the support you need to instantiate that environment for you and manage it for you if you want us to manage it. Or you can also manage it yourself, and we just build the ISC and the code to automate its deployment. But most teams don't want to be in the business of managing DevSecOps environment, and so they end up using our teams to do all that for them as a managed service. We created also the first cloud native access point with DoD CIO. So we partnered with DISA and DoD CIO to move the CAP, the cloud access point, to the cloud as a cloud native elastic resource to get access to impact level 2, 4, and 5 for dev, testing, and production environment, moving to a zero trust mindset. So we are moving from perimeter culture to a full zero trust, enforcing device state and comply to connect, looking at things like the state of the device, whether it's on Mac OS or Windows or iOS or Android, whether it's a GFE, a government device or not, a bring your own device, government device, or a contractor device. We can assess the device state and allow the device to access different things based on its risk and based on the user accessing as well. And so the compounded risk of the user identity and role-based access control and the device will determine what you get access to. And that's game-changing. That creates a real zero trust, granular whitelisting capability based on device state and based on the user role. We also have geofencing and time of the day and things like that as well. Some of the key components to train 100,000 people is we are making a ton of content available, both in terms of virtual onboarding capability and training videos and content. But we also are bringing 2 months, for example, full onboarding, where we embed people from Platform One into the program offices to define what the minimal viable product will be, and then be able to push at the same time, the ability to build that MVP and release it in production within a couple of months, and really do this as a team, so the team that's never done DevOps before can learn and get there faster together. When I think of DevSecOps, a key component is a bunch of managed tools. We have access to Diode to push containers from the low side to the high side. We have a bunch of tools we're bringing from chat to the GitLab of the world, to the GR Confluence of the world, to the cyber tools like Nexus Lifecycle, Black Duck, SonarCube, Checkmarx, Fortify of the world, to pen testing capabilities. A big component of Contus ATO is to continuously pen test both the platform and the application as well. So that is very important, and we do that for the teams by leveraging partners in the pen testing industry to do this continuously and not once and for all. For companies that are trying to sell services or licenses to the DoD, we created the DevSecOps basic ordering agreements, the BOAs, that is 3 vehicles: the cloud services, the tools and licenses, and the talent/services. And in effect, a program office can come to Platform One, pay per money, and either use the contract vehicle with their existing contracting officers, or use the contract vehicle with our contracting officers, and order within 30 days licenses, talent, and cloud services very quickly, to be able to get all the tools and the people they need, whether it's DevSecOps engineers, developers, site reliability engineers, and so on. And same for licenses. If they need 20 different products in DevSecOps that they need to acquire rapidly, that's a great vehicle to get this done under 30, sometimes 60 days, but usually under 30 days. Some people always ask me, what is really infrastructure as code, and what's the value there? And really, I think it's a critical component for DevSecOps. So we have no drift between environments. No human should go and connect to production environment and patch stuff and update stuff and drift from code. The code should be a source of truth. Everything is in Git. That's how we do our change management. That's how we enforce that people don't bypass the pipeline and go make changes in production. That enables us to instantiate environment on demand and tear it down every night if we want to, and bring it back up on different classification levels, replicate it and segment it as needed. It's immutable, it's replicable, it's automated. It reduces the attack surface by not allowing people in production, disabling SSH, no ports open. We use the GitOps mechanism, which is kind of an evolution of IAC, where Git is the source of truth, but now instead of pushing from Jenkins or your GitLab CI tools to production or to staging, it's a pull. So your Kubernetes cluster will pull from Git. So in effect, you don't have ports open in your production or staging environment. Your production cluster or staging cluster is pulling from Git. And so in effect, the CI/CD tools do not have any access to your production environment. And so you get to have everything as code, networking, configurations, seal secrets, everything is consistent. You can roll back if you have an issue. You have full continuous monitoring of the changes. You can do multi-party signing. So if you have things you want to have multiple set of eyes to approve a change, you could do a merge request with 3 people approving it, or 2 people approving it, or 1. And so then you control change, and your change management becomes a bunch of merge requests or pull requests. And then in terms of disaster recovery, everything is code. So all you have to back up is your Git repo and your databases, and you have a full replica of your environment. Much easier to instantiate with complete automation, and everything becomes declarative and manifests in playbooks, describes the desired state in code. And so by just reading the source code, you end up being able to know exactly what should be running in production, which creates a great concept of comparing your source code and comparing what's running in production. And if there's a drift, or if there's something running in production that's not in code, you know there's either something malicious or something happened that should not have happened. And you can then take action to prevent that. And that gives us tons of ability for continuous monitoring to know what's going on in real time. We use Argo CD on platform 1 to be able to do that pull from Git. Argo CD is able to segment repos, so we can have different teams with different access on Kubernetes. So you could have a service mesh team that does the whitelisting of traffic for container A to talk to B, is a different team. Then container A can only deploy the container for in one Kubernetes namespace, for example. And so you have the concept of need to know, least privilege, separation of duties by segmenting your Git repos and who has access to what. Okay, so a lot of people ask us, again, what is a continuous ATO? We are defining this with a DSOG and creating a continuous ATO guidance for the authorizing officials, for the SCAs and ISSMs and the cyber teams across DoD. It's very different from a fast-track accelerated ATO. The concept is compliant with the DoD Enterprise DevSecOps reference design. If you have not seen that, you should take a look at it. That's how we define how to spin up a DevSecOps compliant stacks with the baked-in cyber stack there. And so the concept of the continuous ATO is about creating the process, the CI/CD pipeline with the mandated testing, security, and change management gates that are able to enforce some of the gates that AOs would want to see to approve software. And you can have different thresholds within these gates. For example, you could say for a weapon system, test coverage of unit testing should be 100% or 90% or 95%. But then, for a business system, maybe 70% is enough of test coverage. But then same concept for static dynamic codices, speed of material, continuous security findings, CVs. What do you allow, what you not allow, and needs a waiver or needs approval to pass the pipeline if you have no fix, or if there's no way to mitigate some of the findings, or if it's a false positives, which is often common with some of these container security tools. So in effect, you validate the gates, that accredits the platform. The software factory, in effect, is accredited to produce software, and what comes out of the factory is accredited. And then we authorize the teams, the people that will be using the factory. So people that come on platform one, for example, have to go through the onboarding training to be authorized to use the platform, and then benefit from the reciprocity and can deploy software across classification levels and have access to the CATO DoD-wide. And we don't have to go and revalidate findings across environments and across silos within DoD. So I have a bunch of backup slides. I know we have more time. I kind of went a little fast here. Maybe what could be interesting, we have Kevin Lantrup here from Capital Factory. He is the VP in charge of defense innovation. And maybe, Kevin, I don't know what you think, but maybe we could potentially take some questions now, and potentially I have backup slides where I can do deeper dives to take a look at different things. So are you going to read the questions, or am I reading the questions?
Yeah, I'll read the questions for you. We've got a few in the chat, and there's a few that I've wanted to ask you myself. So for starters, there was a lot of buzz yesterday and today around the Army Futures Command's announcement of their software factory. And I'd ask, what are 2 or 3 points of advice that you would give AFC as they stand up the software factory, learning the lessons from launching and running, Kessel Run and Level Up over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different things that come into play to have a successful team there. Of course, the culture, I think they're addressing very well, being located where they're located. They're going to have access to talent. They're going to have access to the industry and academia to be able to bring the right perspectives when it comes to making decisions. I think the number one lesson learned is don't get locked in, and don't just use a single company to guide you through that process. You want to have different opinions, different ideas. You never want to have just one. So Platform One, for example, has 8 or 9 different companies embedded into the team to bring us different perspectives. So we never just rely on one technology, and so that's a prime component of the success. I would also recommend the Army to take a look at what Platform One is doing and try to reuse as much of the code and the technology and the containers that we accredited. No need to reinvent the wheel there. I know they're tracking that. The key is, of course, to make sure we can do this at scale and have a two-way street between the repos. So if they have new capabilities that could benefit the DoD, it's a great way to share. That's what we've done with Kessel Run. That's what we've done with Kobayashi Maru, Space Camp, Ski Camp, Level Up. We have dozens of factories across the Air Force now. I think we have 20 plus teams. And so, I think the critical piece for me would be to really keep that in mind, not reinventing the wheel. I'm going to put the map of the names of the factory if you want to see that on the screen. But that is showing kind of the list of different teams using Platform One today. Awesome.
So I think there's an interesting parallel there, with Level One or Level Up being down in San Antonio, the Army Software Factory being up in Austin. Those two towns are super close together, but one of the things that we see a lot is that there's still that 77 miles up I-35 is sometimes an insurmountable distance when it comes to collaboration. So hopefully you guys can learn something about that and teach us how to bring those two ecosystems closer together. So there's another question you went over. You covered a ton of information, by the way, which was awesome. I would actually like to take a little bit of a deeper dive. A question that we get a lot relates to things like ATO and FedRAMP. And so you talked about CATO and continuous ATO. We had a question from Scott Schneider. How does Platform One facilitate ATO, continuous ATO? What does that mean for the companies working with you? I would add to that, what does an ATO even mean? How does it relate to FedRAMP? And does it have anything to do with CMMC?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, first, back to FedRAMP, right? If you go as a company and you spend the time and money to be FedRAMP authorized, and you have different levels from moderate to high and even lower than that. But for DoD, anything under moderate brings no value, and really high is kind of really the minimum to get to N-class data. And again, people have to realize for DoD meaningful mission use cases, we need to be able to bring the same capability on classified clouds. And by definition, FedRAMP is not going to enable that. So in effect, we don't see FedRAMP as a viable option when it comes to bringing services into the DoD at scale for real mission weapon stuff, right? So what comes out of that is the concept of containers. So by having a platform that can run like Kubernetes, that can run containers, we can accredit these Lego blocks, these capabilities, and companies can give us their container. So the same capability that they would have gone through FedRAMP and get accredited on the cloud, they can give it to us as a container or a bunch of containers. And we can accredit the containers DoD-wide and with full reciprocity all the way to SAP. So in effect, it's a 2 to 4 weeks accreditation time frame. We scan the containers. We have a whole onboarding guide on the website to have companies follow that process to be added to the repo, in effect becoming part of the marketplace. So as a company, you deliver your container to the repo, you get scanned, and you have to provide justifications as far as cyber findings. It's a very quick pace if you know what you're doing and you know your dependencies and what you're using in your software. And then we kind of provide a certificate to field. A certificate to field is what is used to deploy these containers into an accredited Kubernetes environment. And so then anyone across DoD running Kubernetes will be able to spin up at any classification levels the containers, in effect making your product ready to go for DoD consumption at scale. And then we have the contract vehicle, the Devsecops contract vehicle. So these teams can buy your licenses and your services to be able to support or maintain or just have the licenses of the tools to be able to do that fast as well.
That's great. So I'd like to go back to, I think it was your slide 16, which discussed the broad agency announcement or the BAAs that you guys had. And so broad question, are there going to be any open or upcoming opportunities for companies who want to provide, as an example, DevOps, DevSecOps services? One of our portfolio companies, just as an example, Coder.com, has a really interesting approach. So how could they get involved, or other companies like them? Are there still opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, the virus kind of impacted that. We usually do this as an open, forum. People come and pitch their services and offering. And as you can imagine, with the virus, it kind of disrupted. We were supposed to do one in June. We're trying to do this either July, August for our next onboarding, and we will definitely have one. The question is it going to be fully virtual or not? This is obviously disrupting everything we know. What I also recommend companies in the meantime is to potentially become a sub of one of the companies approved. That's a very easy thing. There's nothing limiting the existing companies to not be able to add more products, more services. And so at the end of the day, we find that most people, there's 55 companies on the boards today. Very easy to find at least one that's going to be willing to add you to their portfolio. And so that's probably the easiest way to get this done in a matter of days and not wait for the next onboarding event.
Awesome. You mentioned something previously about massive scale training and training up to 100,000 people using automated content, something like that. Could you go a little deeper into that? Who's the audience that you're training? Is this for folks that want to work from the private sector that want to work with you guys? Is this for people within the services that are actually writing code? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's both contractors on DoD contracts, and it's also civilian and military people. We have kind of different trainings. So under 100,000 is the total number of people we're going to be training, but we have both the technical piece, which is a tiny subset. I would say probably 25 to 35,000 people are going to get the more deeper technical training on, why does cutting a monolithic application to microservices matter, why being modular matter, why test-driven development matters, cloud native, Kubernetes containers, all that kind of stuff, service mesh. And then you have the other side of the broader vision culture side, which is more for acquisition people, architects, PMs that have to understand why we're doing this, the benefit to the government of getting access to source code, getting access to this continuous engineering mindset. Stop talking about sustainment. There's no sustainment in software. It's continuous engineering. And so changing the mindset of the acquisition community when it comes to software and understanding the DevSecOps model is the only way to build software in 2020.
Awesome. So we have a fairly specific question from Scott Schneider. When do you expect container support for the Azure tech stack?
So technically speaking, we can run on Azure today. We have engagements that are running Kubernetes on Azure. What we're doing now in the next 60 days on Platform One specifically is partnering with Microsoft and the different Kubernetes distributions. Keep in mind, we do not control when OpenShift or TKG or Rancher is able to support Azure government. And keep in mind, there's differences between the commercial public clouds and the government clouds. And so, that's been an impediment, of course, for some of these companies to get their stack running on Azure government or Amazon GovCloud. Air gap clouds, of course, for secret NTS is even harder. And so we're working directly with the companies. We have OpenShift on Azure. People are deploying Convoy and D2IQ Convoy and Rancher as well. I know VMware is also working on Azure. Honestly, it's driven by demand. One of the big reasons as to why more programs are using Amazon today is because of the TS cloud being on Amazon stack and not yet Azure. And I know Azure and Oracle are deploying a TS capability pretty soon. So that's going to help, because most of the work we end up doing is at the higher classification levels, and we need a way to push the containers to the high side. And so it does make sense to use Diode today for that, for example. And that's why a lot of programs want parity and the same stack across all the classification levels. So I would say within 60 days, Platform One will have an Azure unclass capability, and then following with Azure Secret. And then hopefully when they release the TS cloud, we'll have that as well.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like exciting developments. So we got another question from Mike Ziza, but I want to put that question in a little bit of context. So you are the first software officer for the Air Force. You are pretty open in social media about your background, your educational background, how you came into this job. And so I'm curious to hear your perspective on the story of, why does the Air Force have a chief software officer? How did you end up becoming that? Do you have a counterpart in the Army? Is this a model that the other services should be following?
Yeah, I think it's funny how even my own opinion changed on that. When I started, and first I started at OSD ANS, and I was building this DevSecOps initiative with the ODCIO, and we had such a success, we wanted to find a home for it, and we thought having a service as executive agent would make more sense. And Dr. Roper has been a visionary when it comes to DevOps with Kesselrun and other engagements. So we thought, hey, creating something in the Air Force to still represent all of DoD, and that was a condition for me to even take the job, was to still provide all this to all of DoD. I don't want to start having silos within the department. I was a little concerned by the title. Because I told them one thing I want is to do everything like the commercial side, and there's no chief software officer on the commercial side. And so, but we also have different conditions, and the size of the organization is very different. In effect, enterprise services for DevSecOps is critical, and we find CIOs and CTOs to be struggling, even on the commercial side, to understand what it takes to take and build an environment with a cybersecurity, zero trust, the DevSecOps piece, the containers, the Kubernetes piece, and bring that as a cohesive multi-tenant capability, enterprise scale capability for their own teams to consume in a large organization. And we see dozens of commercial companies starting to reach out to ask, hey, how do you do this? Do you think we should have a CSO? And I heard that several companies are starting to hire or try to find the right person to bring to the table to do this. And it's tough because there's a culture piece, there's really understanding the vision on long term of software, and there's a very deep technical background that I guess I have to even understand, the concept behind Kubernetes and service mesh and all that kind of stuff. So I think now that I see the results of enterprise services and how complex this is, I do agree that it does take maybe a dedicated role to get there. The question now is, where does the role reports to? If I were to report to a CIO, I think it would have been very inefficient because I would have to wait for funding and you wait a couple of years just to do anything. The fact that I'm on the acquisition side and reporting to Dr. Roper directly enables us to use program funding to get things done very quickly. So I love that model. I think not many organizations would be able to do what we've done in a year, and so really the right reporting structure and funding stream is critical, but also having the mindset of kind of an entrepreneur with my background, where I see Platform One as a company that has customers, and we want to provide a service, and they can use as much or as little as they want. And if you don't have customers, you should not exist. You're not mandating stuff. You're not pushing people to use the capability if they don't want to use it. And the fear is sometimes in the government or even in commercial companies, people build enterprise services that are one-size-fits-all, very limited. We wanted to bring a ton of options on Platform One. We have dozens of containers, distributions, really a lot of different things that people can customize to adjust to their mission. Even more when you dealing with all of DoD with so disparate set of needs and mission. So I think really keeping that in mind, and the fact that I guess my background is on the commercial side is creating companies, really helps me to keep the same mindset here.
That's awesome. So you as has been the case throughout this 40 minutes, have just said a whole ton in that. I'll just highlight a couple of things. One is, I think one of the innovations that the Air Force has really led in, as the DoD stands up all of these various innovation cells, is I see consistently throughout the process contracting and acquisitions being embedded within the innovation cells. And I think that even our partners from some of the other organizations would agree that the lack of embedded contracting support has been a little bit of a hindrance in being able to execute at speed. And so I think that that's a really astute point. Another thing I'll take out as a follow-up from what you just said is, so I think it's really cool that you said that there's not really an equivalent position within the commercial space to kind of what you're doing right now. And do I understand you correctly that the commercial industry is going to follow the Air Force's lead in establishing a chief software officer position as something to manage enterprise DevSecOps services?
Yeah, so I have several companies reach out, from banking industry to healthcare to retail, you name it, a lot, because we open source the entire stack. That's also a big achievement in DoD, right? To go and say, hey, everything we're going to do is going to be open source, and we're going to benefit from the community. And obfuscation is not bringing any type of security. It's a false sense of security, and we want to bring real, tangible security. And so we open source the whole stack. So we get a lot of companies to reach out and have a two-way street, and even want to participate in some of the code and products we're building. And so, yeah, I hear even some defense industrial base primes, large primes, looking to get a CSO to start having an enterprise DevSecOps team, because they also realize that each program is coming asking for DevSecOps capabilities, and then end up reinventing the wheel at every program layer, which is highly inefficient. They want to save money. They want to be more efficient. They also want to retain talent. The minute you can say, hey, we're contributing back to open source upstream projects, we're involved in the best technologies, open source technologies out there, these developers and designers and teams within the DIB are pretty excited to remain there instead of moving to a Google or Amazon or Azure or whatever, or Microsoft, and really be able to continue working on the most innovative things while making a difference for their countries at the same time.
That's awesome. So I want to move on to cool names of innovation organizations. So you mentioned the party bus earlier, and I was a little bit confused by what you were presenting on that slide. So you mentioned that the paying users to get on that platform, 2K per user per month for a various level of classifications for developers. So could you dive into that? Who are those paying users? Is that other services that are effectively MIPRing money to be a part of what the Air Force has created, or is that again something that's for commercial industry to get involved with?
Yeah, it could be any of the above. So it could be a program office like F-35, Jake, or whatever program, you name it, that is trying to move to DevSecOps, and they don't want to build a factory. They don't want to have all this headache of building a pipeline. they can just use the party bus, right? So smaller teams love to do that, right? When they don't have all the resources to build a custom environment, they can go to the party bus, they can get access in a day or a week and really get started, get the training, onboarding to get started, both for their contractor or civilian military personnel, doesn't matter. The cost is per user, per developer. So they get access to the environment, and they get the CATO, they get the ops, they get the tools, they get the cloud, they get turnkey access to all of that, which, you know, one might think it's expensive, but when you start adding costs of ops and cyber 24/7 support, if you have to build all that stuff and get all this done at production layer as well, it's not just a dev environment, it's a dev, test, staging, and prod at multiple classification levels. It's actually a bargain. You end up saving millions if you were to do this yourself, which is why smaller teams don't have the funding to even do that. So they have no choice but to use something like that. And then the Big Bang is just a dedicated instance. So a bigger program like F-35, they want to share resources, or they want to pick tools on the CI/CD pipeline, for example. They don't want to, let's say they don't want to use some product, they want to use another product. The party bus, you don't get to pick your tool. We pick for the enterprise based on demand, versus the Big Bang, you get a dedicated instance. And that's both for the contractors that could use that to build a DoD software, or it could be a program office or a PEO.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, I'm thinking of organizations like JSOC's Global Analytics Platform. Matt Bonini was here talking about that a little bit yesterday in the Deloitte Operational Data Science panel, discussing kind of some of their, you know, both talent and infrastructure requirements. It sounds like it would be a great fit. So staying on the topic of cool names, really quick. So AFC hasn't named their software factory yet. You have any ideas?
I never get involved in names because it's a nightmare, and I named 12 companies, and that's enough. I did enough for a lifetime. If you look at the Platform One logo, obviously we do fun stuff, and you know, with Baby Yoda and other stuff. But you know, I think it's very critical to have the right name and stay away from acronyms. And I'm also trying to stay away from Star Wars and Star Trek. I think there's enough of that. So let's try to be a little bit more original, and let's try also not to infringe licenses.
Yeah, I mean, now that Chris Lynch is out of the government, all the Star Wars names have to head to that side of the fence. But no, that's a great point. I mean, the name it's part of the innovation culture, right? You have to have the right innovation culture if you want to attract the right talent. You have to have a good mission. You have to have a good operation or environment for them to operate in, but you have to have that innovation culture as well.
Yeah, and the key is to let the team pick the name. You know, I see too often, you know, general officers come up and pick the name. That's the number one mistake you could ever make if the team does not relate to the identity of the team. And I let completely the team design the logo and come up with both the pitch and the branding and the story behind it. You know, we create the ones. It's funny how the ones started in the Air Force, you know, Cloud One, Platform One, the Repo One, and I think we have 28 ones. That was not my intent. I created Cloud One first based on LinkedIn. You know, we have a big presence on LinkedIn, and we had to vote, and someone came up with Cloud One, you know, based on Air Force One, obviously. And so Cloud One, that was the first one, and then the secretary loved the ones, and so the second one was Platform One, and now I think we have 28 ones. That might be too many ones, but you know, we have Device One, we have Repo One, you know, we have so many ones, but that's good. I think it gives a sense of identity. It doesn't mean there's only a one size fits all, though. It just means it's unifying the Air Force across the Air Force.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love y'all's LinkedIn presence. I will admit that I've had a little bit of FOMO as I watch people open up their Platform One swag boxes that they've been getting over the last few weeks.
Yeah, pretty cool. So that's the kind of stuff that people don't think about, right? The kind of investment in marketing. It doesn't have to be significant, by the way. That stuff doesn't cost. You know, people freak out about the box and they say, "Oh, it's a waste of taxpayer money." That's nonsense, right? I mean, that the cost of the box is insignificant compared to how much we pay everything else. And the fact that we can create this culture and retain talent, you wouldn't believe how much it costs the government, right, to train and retain talent. So any little thing like that costs like $20 is game changing for the culture and really getting people excited to remain. And you wouldn't believe how many people are trying to either leave their existing organization and come to Platform One, or get engaged or partner with Platform One because of things like that. They see the difference with people pushing the envelope when it comes to the marketing and branding.
Yeah. I'll make one more comment on that topic, and then we'll move on to the next question because we have a few stacking up. But I think that at the DoD enterprise level, we need to have a discussion about some of the more restrictive ethics rules relating to gifts and relating to clothing, T-shirts, food, and how that gels with operating in these innovation environments when you're trying to integrate effectively into the environment and attract and retain talent. But moving on to Trevor Smith's question from L3 Harris, to what extent does Devsecops AF groups help specify requirements for edge computing hardware? And he's talking about minimum hardware requirements, processors, memory storage to run cloud infrastructure at the edge.
So I have 12 teams as part of the DoD DSOG, the DoD Security Authorization Working Group for Devsecops. One of the team is specifically looking at both embedded system and edge use cases, including running Kubernetes and Istio and the containers on the real-time OS, which is a whole subset of the work, which creates a lot of complexity when it comes to real-time OSs. When it comes to edge in general, the vision is to be able to have different form factor of hardware that can horizontally scale and connect to create bigger clusters, right? So in effect, what we're trying to do is have different form factors with blades, for example, that could have CPU, GPU storage, right? And then you can swap blades, add more blades, or add more racks horizontally, all the way from a backpack to a Humvee to Interjet to a bigger data center on-prem disconnected air gapped. I think few key components are keeping in mind the air gap is really a requirement. We need to be able to have a full control plane on premise and not have to connect or ping back. I mean, pinging is great if we can do it, but it shouldn't be a requirement. So being able to be fully air gap is really critical for us. And then the ability to horizontally scale is more important than the hardware and the specs. In effect, if you bring me a rack or a tiny box that I have, some CPU, GPUs, and storage or whatever, and I can swap or I can tie two together, or three, and create a bigger cluster. And we're working with companies like Red Hat and VMware and others to see how do we automate the growth of the detection of, hey, you plug two devices and now you have a bigger cluster. It's detecting you have more nodes, you have more CPU, you have more storage capability, and now you can do more stuff without having to do anything in software, just by plugging the stuff. And so that's more the modular approach, instead of saying, hey, I want this hardware that is this specific set of requirements. I like modularity, and I like to be able to connect them to create bigger edge concepts.
Yeah, I mean, the modularity is key. The plug and play is key. General Murray was talking about this yesterday during the opening keynote with Andy Jassy, talking about one of the big initiatives for the Army is and really across DoD is the modular open systems architecture, and making sure that things can be upgraded by really any vendor that can meet the security requirements and that can deliver capability. So a question from David Soul asking, is SAAR handled by Platform One, or is that the responsibility of the container owner?
Can you tell me what? Sorry, too many acronyms in DoD. What is SAAR? Do you know?
Actually, I do not know. So maybe we'll go on
and see if so maybe someone can tell us, and then I'll get back to it. Too many acronyms. I'm sure I know what it is, but until someone tells me what it is, I don't know.
So I have a question that you may have a perspective on, and I don't know how familiar you are with how the Air Force and specifically AF Ventures is running the SBIR program. But this is something near and dear to a lot of our companies, which is trying to find that end user customer, two people, the end user and the customer, for their products, and so that they can get onto that phase two. And Platform One has been, as the place where the application sits, has been a signer of a lot of MOUs, but I know we're moving on from that. And so what's the advice for you? How does that person connect, to the customer who might be using, whatever's going to sit in that API layer? And do you think it's better, should Platform One be a pathway for folks to find those end users?
So there's two components there, right? There's the ability for the company to demonstrate the product in a DoD environment. And I think being able to use Platform One to deploy the stack and do continuous iteration and continuous engineering live, and not wait, a year or whatever, or 6 months to start getting a full accreditation of the product. It makes sense. So use Platform One as a development environment to also then get access to end user, so they can play with stuff. Right? I see organizations interested to try new things, but when they have to do the ATO and they have to spend a year to document the stuff, they lose patience. So just being able to be on Platform One, and ABMS picked Platform One as their platform, and so ABMS will be doing a lot of onboarding of different capabilities. So being able to be on Platform One just streamlines access to the end user, so they can consume the service, right? So now it's easier to remove the barrier to entry, right, for these products to be consumed. Now, of course, it doesn't find you the customer, but at least there's no more barrier for them to start trying, whether it's just a trial, whether it's just a pilot or Pathfinder. But then, the contract vehicle of Platform One also gets you access to buying the product, or like you said, doing a phase 2. But again, you could also sell the license. I mean, nothing stops you from then licensing the product as well with a vehicle. So you don't have to wait for a phase 2. You could license the product and just, sell it. I think the finding the right customer is very difficult. We try to help when we can. It is still very much based on relationship and who I know or the team knows that could want to try something like this. We try to pinpoint, people and do introductions. We do it all the time, but it's very inefficient. I mean, it's still driven based on relationships and what I know, what the teams know that someone is looking for. And so it's just very inefficient. So we're going to have the marketplace, and hopefully by being on the marketplace, then it's much easier for people to find out. So we're going to have tagging capabilities and categories of products. And then, assuming you have a good product, people will be able to find you already there, and you're already accredited, you're on a contract vehicle. That removes the barrier to entry. And now we can, really promote on everywhere in the Air Force this marketplace. And it's a DoD marketplace, so anyone can use it. So I think the marketplace could really help do the bridge between the customers and the products.
Awesome. So I think we're in our last minute. So Nic, I want to say thank you. I'm going to ask you to speak one more time, which is, so we've got investors, startups, academia, traditional defense industry, and other DoD programs and customers on the line. What's your call to action? What can this consolidated group that really wants to be helpful do that we're not doing to help you?
I think it's all about working together on this. Join the repo, share your containers, share your code. Don't fork the code. Don't recreate the wheel. Partner. If it's nothing is perfect. This is 6 months old. We know there's plenty of things we want to improve. Tell us what we can improve. Collaborate. Send code to us. Do merge requests. Join the AMA sessions. We have one tomorrow at 1 p.m. Where people can ask questions for 2 hours directly to me. We're going to show tomorrow how we put Kubernetes on real time, on jets and bombers. So join, participate in those collaboration, and share and spread the knowledge. Everything is public on the website, so there's just no excuse not to have access to the content.
Awesome. Well, Nic, this is your first time at Capital Factory. Thank you so much. We're going to get you here in the flesh here, hopefully as soon as possible. But I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.